Hi, and welcome to GM Tips. This is GM Rick, relaxing and enjoying a day off on our 4-day weekend. So, one thing I wanted to go into a little bit, and we've kind of, I think, discussed on dead campaigns before, but I want to do a whole horror based campaign. And I've been reading, fortunately, in the new horror adventures. And there is so much you can do with a horror-based campaign. Keep in mind that a horror-based campaign is going to be very different than campaigns that you've run before. Why is that? Because horror-based deals with a lot of factors and environmental factors, as well as unique things that happen during it that can affect your players. Now, keep in mind, one thing that your players may or may not agree to is the fact of allowing you to have these type of effects as a GM on them. So ahead of time, you have to prep them for a horror campaign. And I think that's the number one thing going in. You have to prep them that a lot is not going to be in their control. And it's not going to be a standard heroes versus baddies campaign. It just is not going to be that way. And there's a lot of knowledge and things that they will see that can drive their sanity right out of them. And so you want to really make sure you take the time to explain ahead of time some of the effects, things that can happen, and get their buy-in. Because, and I'll give you for instance, players may or may not take well to having things put upon them. Some player types don't, again, they're afraid of nothing. So as players, so they don't want their characters to be afraid. They will tell you up and down that they are not the type that fears anything, that, oh, well, if they see a severed head flying around at them, it's not going to freak them out in real life. Now, I kind of laugh at that a little bit, because if somebody saw a severed head flying around in their house, chasing them, jabbering at them, they'd be a little bit freaked out. But as what the justification I hear so often come up, and this is going to be the challenge you got to overcome with them, is my character has seen it all. They live in a fantasy campaign. Nothing will surprise them or freak them out. And that's, in my mind, not a true situation. And I'll tell you why. Because if you think about it, in real life, even the bravest of people are shaken by some of the weirdest things that they see. And in my true belief in a campaign like this, you've got to explain that to a player. Look, in real life, if you were in a sanatorium all night, in a haunted sanatorium, and you saw some of the crap you saw, it would shake you to your core, especially as these things assault you again and again on your psyche. It's going to just do things to you. It'll cause you to snap one way or the other. And so you have to take it into almost a real situation where you're explaining it to them in order for them to get a buy-in. So just keep that in mind. And I'm sorry, I've got you guys on a lap table, so hopefully I won't bounce it around too much as I move and gesture. But that's the number one thing that you've got to get, is that buy-in. And it explains this in the beginning here. And one of the things that it explains in the beginning of the book, and I really appreciate, is it talks about playing a horror hero. And I think before you get your players to buy in, you got to have them read these sections on playing a horror hero, and then the aspects of a horror hero. Having a goal, having a reputation, having a friend, having a home, having a signature item, having a problem, having a secret, and having a reason to be brave. And those all are taken into account here. Now, as they go along, they're going to be susceptible to things in a horror campaign. Here are the things that they're going to be susceptible to. Number one, fear. Fear is a huge thing in a horror campaign that your players are going to have to get used to. The second thing that they got to get used to is paranoia. Paranoia will happen, and it's going to be a part of their sanity. And sanity and insanity are a huge part of a horror campaign. Because think about it, in a horror movie, some of the things that people see drives them insane. A perfect example is the movie series Saw, or the series of movies The Purge. You think about the people there. You think about the thin line that they walk between sanity and insanity, and it is a very thin line. And that's really what is the whole aspect and essence of a horror campaign for you as a GM. You have to really create that thin line between sanity and insanity, between paranoia and fear, and between just the other maladies that can come upon people. And some of the things they discuss in a horror campaign that you have to decide ahead of time whether you want to incorporate. There are different types of afflictions that can come on your players. One is the accursed. That is somebody who has been basically, the corruption begins with a hateful curse, visitations from a night hag, or another relentless magical torment. These curses often originate from hags, witches, gods, fays, deprived genies, or insidious divs. So, like the Wishmaster. Um, Even if the curse is lifted, the corruption lingers upon your soul. So, even if the curse goes away, it has corrupted you as a hero. Deep Ones. If you remember the Dunwich Horror, this is where these guys come in. The Deep Ones are part of Cthulhu. They're like the scum and some of the other things. And basically, you have either the taint in your blood, somewhere in your bloodline, or you're exposed to it somehow. So, exposure to the presence of Deep Ones can cause you to heed the call of deep waters with torturous transformations. Less common means are ritualistic transformation, curses, or in extreme cases, copulation with the Deep One. So any of those type of things can warp and transform your character. And again, you get manifestations, and these are the key things. It goes through a progression of corruption stages, and this book is great for that because it takes you through how to progress the corruption in the player. And then what kind of manifestations come out in that corruption? The ghoul and the ghoul fever. This is an amazing way of watching a character go towards ghoul fever. Being hellbound. So, I know that in the campaign with the Inner Sea campaign, being a through night talks about this, but this talks about how to become a diabolical creature or humanoid. And so there are some things where that affects you. I love this one, the Hive, where you become some sort of alien creature, insect or otherwise, and that corruption's interesting. Of course, the Lich. And I think this does a great job of going through what happens with a Lich. I love this, lycanthropy. And it talks about, because everybody wants to be a lycanthrope, but it goes through the different things that happen when you become one. And I love the lunar call. Whenever you're outside, the moon is visible. You gain morale bonuses on that, but you take a -2 on the emotional effects and other things. So there's a bonus and a drawback on all these manifestations. Being possessed, it can happen to a spiritualist or an occultist or anything else where you grab onto the wrong type of spirit, with a medium maybe. A Promethean. This is comes from the experimentations to extend your life, and I love how they use Valeros for that. So basically, these are things to improve you. The Shadowbound. Basically, in this case, Shadowbound corruption occurs after a month or more exposure to the shadow plane or shadow magic. So as you mess into this, it messes with you. Vampirism, of course, most of us know that. It talks about what kind of manifestations go on there. So it does some great things on this, and I think in these corruptions, keep these things in mind. Corruptions are an interesting effect to a horror campaign. That means your hero, even in the best of days, can be polluted to become something more evil and sinister. And that's where you as a GM can really take that to a level of the heroes being a little more cautious as they approach these type of creatures or situations, because they don't know what it's going to do to them. See, in the past, it's like, oh, you get a disease from being a ghoul. Okay, you get the fever, and the fever runs a little bit high, but you're able to cure it, so no big deal. I think, in the sake of the game simplicity, and I love simplicity in games sometimes, we take away the very things and the very essences that can make it more unique and in a process that makes you really think about what's going on with the ghoul fever. or a transformation into a deep one. What horrific things are going through the mind of your characters and your players? You have to take it to those levels to really and truly make it into a campaign that's going to be memorable. You can't just gloss over it and say, yeah, you got bit by a lycanthrope, so you feel like you could be getting sick. No, 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 no. Here I'm gonna call on you GMs and DMs to take it to another level, because see, that's where so many players, and it's because we as GMs and DMs didn't know how to play it out. Look at the horror movies, look at the different genres. They don't do that. It becomes nightmares. So your character got bit by a lycanthrope and you weren't able to cure him right away. The first night you are thrown into fever pitched dreams of running out in the wild and howling and baying at the moon, and a lust and a hunger for blood and flesh. See, these are the things. As you describe this to the player, then all of a sudden this bite becomes pretty horrific, and it's not a good thing. And they're not thinking in their right mind, and they're not thinking of the things that they should. Any type of curse placed by a hag or a witch or some other outsider, you just feel your very skin begin to crawl, and you just know in the pit of your heart that you have a new pull now, a desire for something darker and deeper, more base, as you are drawn to this lust. And see, these are the descriptions that are going to take that player and that situation and make it more epic, because now there becomes a priority to deal with it. And even if we cure it, does it deal with everything? See, we make cures as, yep, cleric lays her hands, you're cured. The effects and the scars of that disease running its course and the nightmares begin to move your psyche and your sanity. And if you have it happen enough times, you eventually give in to the very base emotions that are just plaguing you inside. I love watching Fringe, because Fringe, and I went into this a little bit, I think, one of my other episodes. There was an episode in Fringe where Liv goes into the two different worlds. And as you know, with Fringe, there's two different worlds. And I know I'm giving some away, so I'm sorry. Spoiler alert. I will put that in my thing. But they have the two worlds, and they have different versions of you. There's your version in one world and another. And these are dimensions. So little twists of things can make it so much different. And this is where you have to think about that. And this doctor in the one universe, because a kindness of a woman came into his life that was like a mother and a grandmother to him, it kept him away from the very darkness in his soul that would have later on caused him to experiment on people to try to find happiness. Whereas in another world, he doesn't get that woman, and he misses it. And so you get to see the two effects, and you see the fine line between sanity and insanity. And really, it could be one person teaching you that you can overcome your base desires, whereas others, you don't have that influence. And maybe that begins to twist you. You were sitting on a fine edge as it was, but now you're toppling over. And so these are the kind of things, as you do a horror campaign, you got to make it into this type of battle. It's an inner battle going on with the very psyche and soul of your characters and the very psyche of the heroes themselves. So keep that in mind. As you're doing this campaign, it's going to be a much more immersive and a much more powerful campaign, but at the same time, it's profound. Like, I was reading this. By the way, you want to start into a horror campaign, beautiful example of it. And Wes Schneider does a great job. And I love Wes in this way. And I do, Wes. I really do. I don't know you that well as a human being, but everything I've seen and read and all your works, you inspire people to have some fun with the very aspect of horror. And yet, you probably are the nicest, funniest person to sit with in the world, and no one would even suspect that you you spin these kind of tales. But he just brings out that pervasive, like in this whole thing, there's a pervasive underlying miasma of insanity and things that just plague the mind and the soul. And it's the whole miasma of it that just really pervades the whole adventure. That's the greatness of being a GM is in a DM, is that you can bring that as well. Mini GM sighting of a head. So keep that in mind, that you are going through and building a lot of it is just the unsaid underlying tensions that really makes the campaign what it is. I'll give you, for example, I played a Call of Cthulhu campaign with Noof and Noof Gaming, and got to play it with Chaotic Anarchy, and I'm giving you their Twitter things. It's Chaotic Anarchy Eggs or the Eggs, and some other players that were in there as well. And I really had a great time with all of them. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a fun campaign, but what it did was it set a tone of just underlying wrongness and everything. And I could have sat there as a player and just played everything off. See, I designed a character that was probably the most, and it's weird for me because I normally don't, warrior-esque of characters. And in designing that character, he'd been through World War One and the horrors of the World War One, the French Foreign Legion, and he had seen things in Egypt and some other areas that led towards the Cthulhu mythos. But even so, my character's sanity got challenged all the time, and I blew some sanity rolls. Um, because when he saw a person becoming ripped by ghoulism and another one that was ripped by the very fabric of seeing it, it led him to just really have an inner battle with his own sanity. And as Chaotic could probably attest to in Noof, my character was always one step away from going nuts and taking the machete and just chopping them all up. And I could have run it as, well, no, my character's not that way. He's a strong guy. He's seen wars. No, Noof, what do you mean? What do you mean this causes his sanity to go? Well, no, I don't think so. I don't agree with you. I don't. And I could have done that the whole campaign. I could have easily battled the GM and made the life miserable for that GM. Instead, I decided to embrace the fun of it. Okay, so I'm always hanging a little bit on the ragged edge. That makes my hero that much more great when he hangs on. It's what makes him sane. It's what makes him that one step off of being the serial murderer that comes back from war and just starts chopping people up. That's the difference. So, for those, and this is a little tidbit for players, your whole thing of, oh my gosh, I'm giving away my control to my GM so that they can be in control of a horror campaign. I don't like that. I don't want to feel my character's weak. I made a hero for a reason. I don't want them to have that weakness. Why is there always got to be that challenge? That, my character's strong psyche. He survived this and this and this. Why wouldn't he be strong in this? You're missing the whole point. The point of a hero is the hero always hangs to a little bit of sanity, and is always a step away from fear and paranoia and just losing everything. Think about all the horror movie heroes. None of them are these stalwart people that just have no chinks in their armor. They're not these otherworldly creatures. I know some of you may play tieflings or Azamar or Geniekin or something along those lines, and you think, okay, because I have that blood in me, I am invincible. No, you aren't. No more so than the natural human being. The humans and the elves and the dwarves, that you are no more sane than they are. You just have a different blood in you that gives you some abilities that you normally wouldn't have. It doesn't ensure you're shining, pristine. Look, there are many Azamars that are in the world of Galarian or that are in other campaigns that are nutty and the worst evil that walks the face of the earth. Their blood does not ensure them goodness. Nor more does the tiefling blood, or tiefling, however you want to pronounce it, ensure that they're evil or diabolical. They're not. But so often, because they're thought of that way and abused, they're sent to that direction. They're not. There are some that are some of the most benevolent kindness souls you would ever meet in a world. So just because you have a blood of some sort of evil or good creature running through your veins does not equal that you are going to go that direction. Yes, there's an inner war that goes on, just like there is with human beings. There's that inner battle and that struggle, and that's what makes a hero. So don't discount your GM trying to run you this way. Now, that said, let's move on to the next aspect of a horror campaign. What is the overall plot? And you have to have a plot and a setting. Now, they remind you a couple things, and I've been reading in here, and I really love this. They talk about in this section, and section 5 really hits the areas that you can really go after. They go through curses and horrific diseases, okay? And they go through haunts and madness and flesh warping and environments. So there are several different things that really, when you want to put together a campaign of horror, that you need to know. And they're within there. They talk about curses, how they're just not inflicting dreadful consequences, but how they have permanent effects on people. Environments. The environments themselves introduce new hazards, CRs, and often these warped dreamscapes and places and planes will warp the very mind and the fabric of a hero. Flesh warping, somebody messing with the magic to change the outer natural flesh of a creature. And basically, it could be from radiation, pollution, or magic, but it really is the body's warped so it can warp the mind. Horrific diseases that rage the body and can cause ailments like brain moss, gore worms, and skin waste that will destroy the body and the mind. Haunts, and how haunts can affect people. And then the very madness that comes from these things. Now, in other books, they talk about the core rulebook has cursed items, curses, and diseases. The Game Mastery Guide has the planner things and the haunts, so it can really help you with those, and sanity and madness. The Occult Adventures bring in the rituals and the new haunt rules and mindscapes and esoteric planes and cursed items. The Ultimate Campaign goes through a little bit on alignment and how things shift due to corruptions. Ultimate Equipment has cursed items, and then the Ultimate Magic has binding of outsiders. Now, I love that they bring in new curses. They have simple curses in the first book, but they bring in the new ones. And these curses, the CRs go up, and the DCs go up. And that's as it should be. The more difficult, the more crazy people can go. And then you can create new curses. And I love that idea. And that's something as a GM, you really want to figure out, if you're going to have curses, what are those curses going to be? And how will they affect you? Cursed items can take you there. And so remember, they have some new cursed items. Now, plagues and diseases, as you remember, as we looked at the zombie plagues and other things, they have other plagues, like are in these books. They have the lingering, the incurable, the lethal, the magic resistance, and just a full-on plague. So diseases can take a new level that are outside the normal level of gaming. And keep that in mind as you look at that. And they have new diseases that come up in this book. Now, environments. I love the environments because you can do hazards in those environments that are going to affect creatures and characters. So figure out, are they going to be adventuring just on the regular world? Is it a warped place of the world? Strange Aeons. They have some effects that go on to do just some of what went on in the sanatorium. Not giving anything away, but there's some effects. So you could have something that is basically messing with people, like a blood moon or a bottomless pit or an animated fog or grasping graves that go after people, a field of bone, an insidious domicile that is affecting people, a sour ground, a watchful doll that is watching everybody. So you can really deal with this. And then they have the domains of evil and the curses and the horrific traps. You have nightmare dreamscapes. And nightmare dreamscapes They don't necessarily kill the player, but they work on the psyche, and in some cases they do. In some cases, after they die, that's when the real changes begin. They go into flesh warping and what it does, and the effects of flesh warping as maybe an evil experimenter works on you. Haunts. I always love haunts. Haunts are the most difficult thing to overcome for a player because there's not necessarily just hit points. There are some hit points, but they come back and they keep coming back. They deal with a little bit with madness, and I love that they took a whole section on madness and what's going on. So what types of madness are there, and then what kind of lingering effects? And then they got a whole section on that type of thing. So you want to keep in mind as you're working with this horror adventure, what are going to be some of the biggest challenges and obstacles for your heroes? Is it sanity? Is it diseases? Is it planescapes? Is it being accursed? Is it other things that are going to really plague the characters? Is it horrific planescape and dream mares where they go to sleep and they're constantly assailed in their dreams? How does that affect their spell prep? How does it affect them in their daily casting? How does it affect them sanity-wise? See, these are all things that as you plan it out, get your structure and your framework of what you want to have challenge your players. And then it talks, and there's a great section in section 6 on running of the horror adventures. And I love this because then it goes and gives you things as a GM that you want to know. And one of the things it hits on is storytelling, like I talked about. And then horror versus heroism. What kind of horror subgenres are there? Is it a body horror, a cosmic horror, a dark fantasy, a ghost story, a gothic style horror, a psychological horror or thriller, a slasher one? And then how to create them. So you got to know the medium. Part of this is, and the hardest part is an immersion of watching some of these things. Because otherwise, if you haven't watched them, you don't know how to produce them. And again, you choose your terror, you spread your terror, and then the fear is going to come. In the horror storytelling, one of the things they hit on is narrative dread, dramatic storytelling, and ominous settings. So you have to set the scene for the players to make it a reality for them. And then you can go through just different things you can do, from splitting of the party to everything else. They talk about game space, lighting, and music, and having the nasties there. And then rules improvisation. What if you were buried alive? What if you were burned at the stake? What if you were hung? And then they give you gear in section 7. So one of the things you really want to do is you really want to sit down and figure out, okay, what is going to be the setting? Why are my players going to be here? What is the overlying thing? And it's no different than a regular campaign and setting up a baddie at the end that's trying to deal with things and everything else. But in this case, maybe it's evil deities like the Cthulhu deities. Maybe it's another deity like Orcus, or maybe it's another nasty devil or demon lord who's trying to just pollute the very fabric of reality. Or maybe it's some sort of necromancer, or maybe it's a lich, or maybe it's something else. You have to set what that horror aspect is. Great example, Strahd and the Curse of Strahd for D&D. Perfect example of setting a campaign around the horror of Strahd himself. And if a GM runs it right, it can be a thrilling, chilling adventure that just tears at the very fabrics of your character's realities. And you can use the sanity rules and the other things, and the afflictions. So there are some crazy things going on. And that whole world has a darkness to it. There's Ustalav in Pathfinder. Ustalav's a country just pervaded with horror and the effects of horror, as is the world. So the two of them together fuel each other and just really cause nightmare madnesses to be reality. So there's a lot of things that you have to decide of where am I setting this and why am I setting it there? And then how is it going to play out? You can leave a lot of room because your players in this one are going to be a lot more challenged. They may not finish the adventure like your normal adventures will. So, have the things of how will they deal with all these negative aspects going on in their life? How will they deal with all the dread and the things and the warping of things? I mean, let's be honest. If you saw an attic whisperer, would you really and truly just poo-poo it off? Or would it freak you out that you're seeing the soul of a young child inhabiting this doll or whatever cobbled together material, and it can literally steal your voice to speak, and then you have no voice? So what does it do to a spellcaster? What kind of madness does it leave? See, so often with these really horrific creatures, we don't spin them right as GMs. We just kind of say, you're seeing a grave knight, you're seeing a vampire. No, 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 no. Set the scenery, set the foundation of the crazy there, because you really have to work with it. Minnie, sit back. You're not allowed to be on the videos. I know people love to see her, but my fiance says no Minnie GM on the video, so I got to honor that. So, but keep in mind that you have to have that setting, and a lot of it's the story and the setting itself. So as I'm going into this for you, I keep coming back to that, and it's really true. You make it horrific by just the very feel. And it's okay to reveal parts of the plots through the baddies, but do it in such a way that chills the very foundation of your players. I'm doing one right now for my players, and they went off on a side thing. And this place is made to be what it is. It's as built. It's not a nice place where a lot of people have passed away. Mini GM, I love you. Cut it out. Yes, we must have the pink comb of doom in this whole thing, because that'll add to the horror aspect of it. As you can see, I don't do the most professional ones, but I try. Um, so the flying bodiless comb that flies by that's pink with a hand out of nowhere. Just keep in mind that's another horror aspect. Um, yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted my train of thought. But really, you want to spin it with how you tell it. And my players are more freaked out by the way I'm describing it to them. They have never gone into a town like the one they're in right now. They really don't know what to do, and it just doesn't get better as it goes along. There are some very chilling aspects that assail their sanity, and they don't like that I'm challenging and making them roll their sanity. That's okay. It's a weird place, fueled by weird things, by something very malevolent. So guess what? It is going to chew away at the fabric of your sanity. One of them is finally embracing it and asks me if they can take a permanent drawback with having paranoia as their drawback, and I'm like, sure, I like that idea. I'm not going to turn that away. I think it's a great deal. And I'll allow them to gain a trait from it, or allow them to maybe gain something in the positive thing for it. But there's going to be some things in the negative. It's going to mean that they're going to be more susceptible to things. And so this is the fun of the trade-off. And you as a GM have to really set that. Allow them to take drawbacks in the beginning and their backgrounds that allow them to blend into this horror campaign and make them a little more vulnerable. That's a fun thing for both the player and the GM. And again, you want to really set the mood. So music and just the setting itself and just the pictures you show them. So download some of the more darker pictures, because that's what you're going to assail them with. Yes, it'll chill them a bit, but guess what? That's part of the process. You're trying to put a little bit of fear in them. So keep that in mind. And again, how you spin it is always going to be the most profound effect on them. And you really have to do things different when you're doing a horror campaign. You cannot just spin it like you do a normal one. You have to make it much more vivid and rich. Something always lurking at the edge of their vision that they can't quite see or can't quite make out when they're listening to what it's saying. Those type of things will begin to put a little bit of tension in your players. And it begins to build the tension for a great campaign where they're always watching a little bit over their shoulder because they don't know what's going to creep up on them next. And there's always a gnawing doubt in the back of their mind of what is really going on here? Why is this happening? Why am I being assailed? Don't give away too much. Let them really just unravel it little by little. It's kind of like the horror movie where they begin to figure things out little by little, and then it dawns on them. And when the dawning of realization comes, that's the most horrific of them all. And that's what deals the blow to their characters that they didn't expect. So these are the kind of things when you're spinning this out, you want to really weave in. And I love doing these kind of campaigns. They're fun. I ran one. I wish I would have had these rules for Carrying Crown. Now that I got them, I will run that again for somebody totally different than I did for my party. Even though I had a ton of fun, now we're at another level of what I can do to spin this tale to make it that much more powerful and not have to worry about just kind of adding sections as we go along. Now I can interweave it in because it helped me out. I do recommend getting Horror Adventures. If you haven't gotten it for D&D5E or if you haven't got it for Pathfinder, get it. The rules can apply to either one. The equipment can apply to either one. The magic can apply to either one. Utilize it. It is great for both systems. And some of you say, well, I still got to convert some things. Okay. Is it worth doing? Yeah, it is. The tools they give you are pretty profoundly fun. And it's well worth the money in the spend, in my mind. So do that a little bit more as you're going in and pre-prep things. That's one of the things I do with my sessions and my campaigns is I do a lot of prep work. There's a reason why I do prep work. Prep work allows you to go in, and you're not going to have everything set because your players, like I've told you in many other one of my GM tips, they're going to go their own directions. Okay, my party is so far off the rails of this adventure that it's not even funny. They are way off the rails, but I'm having fun with it. What happens? I have to adjust some things later on in the adventure path. Oh well. It's worth the epic memories that we're building with this one. They're not ever going to forget the Reign of Winter. That one's going to stick with them for a long, long time. That's really what you want to do as a GM. You and a DM, you are trying to use the effects in such a way that your players will never forget how well you ran that and how much fun it was. And don't keep doing it campaign after campaign because you're going to lose the luster of it. You got to come up with something new and fun with each one. And that's the whole fun of DMing and GMing, is you are the creator. You are the creative juices. And you don't get bored. If you have the tools at your hands to utilize and do this. Now, some of you are going to say, Rick, I can't spend $40 a book. Get the PDF. It's $9.99. How expensive is that? It's not. Compared to everything else, that's cheap. And oh, by the way, you can incorporate it into Hero Labs for another $9.99. You can get the Hero Labs module and put it in. Do it. I'm telling you, you won't regret these things, and it's going to be well worth your time and money spent. That's minimum amounts of $9 to buy something like that, and you can read it online. I love having the book forms because I read them much easier. But you know what? If I can't afford them, I'm going to go the $9.99 and get it anyways. So, thank you guys. I want to give a special thanks and shout out to some great creative minds. And I am going to share this because I think these people need some especially extra praise. To Wes Schneider and Amanda Heyman Kuntz, tremendous work, guys. I mean, I give you a huge shout out on the Paizo staff. You guys are just greatness when it comes to horror. Love your guys' stuff. James Jacobs, thanks for making all these creative minds available, as well as Eric Mona and Mr. Jason Bowman. You guys really and truly have assembled a great staff, and Lisa helped makes it all happen by backing you guys to the nth degree. So I want to give shout outs to her as well. But the lead designer on this one, of course, is Jason Bullman. But then you had Logan Bonner and Stephen Radney McFarland. Mr. McFarland, boy, you do some great stuff. And Mark Safter, you guys are greatness in these things. Now Wayne Reynolds, geez, Wayne, I don't know how you draw this so well, but by gosh, you are a creative genius when it comes to drawing. I love your stuff. I download your stuff all the time and give you credit for it. So, David Alsop, great artist. Dave Alvarez, um, Hazem Amin, Leonardo Barazio, Chris Cassiano, and then Thomas Chitowski, Alberto De Lago, Mariana Fernandez, Matt Forsyth, Cheese Up, and so many more. There's a whole list of them here that are part of this. Now, the senior art director who makes it happen is Sarah Robinson. Great stuff. And then Sonia Morris. And then everyone else who's just great parts of this team. I really appreciate you guys. And I think you're just a tremendous team. And no offense to the Wizards folks. They've got some good people on their staff too. But Paizo just hits home runs. They really do with their stuff. And I know some of you are Paizo critics. I ask you to rethink things, guys, because the amount of creative genius there is just freaking amazing. And the third parties that add to it, I wouldn't go against it. I'm just telling you. So, with that, I want to thank everybody again for sitting in on this GM tip, and we'll talk to you soon.